I hear that some people are waiting for Zen 2 before buying a PC, and although it's maybe not that far away and waiting would probably be a very good idea at this point, I honestly would think that some people should consider maybe not buying a Zen 2 simply because of price. Every time a new CPU or a new GPU nowadays comes by, the price is inflated and it's way more expensive than it is if you just go out and buy something older. And the neat thing about the AM4 platform is that you can buy something that's a little bit older, like the Ryzen 7 1700 right now. It's cheaper, and then you can have a PC that runs pretty well and plays basically all games. Like it may not run at the highest frame rates, but honestly, considering the market and how games are today, honestly, I don't think you need the most high end PC to get the most enjoyment out of your computer. I honestly think people should consider buying what's cheaper and in order to just enjoy what they have. Because if you go out and you buy the latest and greatest, chances are you're not going to be able to appreciate most of that power unless you have something in mind for how you're going to utilize it. But for gaming in general, you might not even want necessarily the highest of everything because the highest frame rates and the highest visuals and everything about it, it's just not going to be utilized necessarily. And what I mean by this is like you can have, let's say, the best like the a 9900K and a 2080 Ti right now, and you probably will have some buyer's remorse if you don't have the best monitor for it. And if you do have all everything in check, like you have everything works perfectly. You have the best monitor, you have the best hardware. It's going to work pretty well and it's going to look fantastic, but is it really worth the money? And that's something that a lot of people aren't considering. And if you're going to buy Zen 2 when it drops, there's a high chance that there's going to be a price increase over the last few Ryzen CPUs that came out, and that's gonna be probably a reality simply because every new tech that comes out, it might not happen with AMD, but every new tech that's been coming out has been just inflated in price. And we've seen this recently with AMD's releases of GPUs, whether it's the 590 or if it's the recent Ryzen 7 GPU, and they're great performance, but for the money, I think a lot of people would just be happier getting something cheaper. And right now, you're going to see a lot of sales in stores simply because they're trying to liquidate everything that they have before Zen 2 comes out with all the previous Ryzens. And I think those deals won't necessarily be there once Ryzen or Zen 2 comes out. And I think people should really consider whether or not they would rather get in on those deals now as opposed to wait until Zen 2 comes out and buy that. And the reason I say this is because when when Turing GPUs were coming out, the Pascal GPUs went on sale for really good prices. Some people bought 1080 Ti's for $350 or around $300 because people were so desperate to sell those, thinking that, oh well, the mining craze is over, so I gotta dump these before the Turing GPUs come out because people aren't going to want these once they come out. But the reality of it was that when Turing came out, they were overpriced, and a lot of people went back and tried to buy some Pascal. But at that time, the price had inflated again. And right now, you don't know. Most people don't know what the performance is going to be on Zen 2. There's a lot of rumors out there that you might hit 5 gigahertz. Honestly, from what I've seen, it runs on 7 nanometers, and on the tech demo they show, it beats a 9900K. So there's a chance that it's going to be 5 gigahertz. But since it's on 7 nanometers, chances are it's not necessarily going to hit 5 gigahertz. It's going to probably be around 5.5. 5.6, but if it does hit 5 gigahertz, that's just great. But the thing is, like, I think even the 9900K, once it's overclocked, will run a bit faster than what they showed you here. And then, yeah, you can kind of overclock a Ryzen CPU, but chances are, from what's been kind of the thing with Ryzen is like when you overclock it, sometimes you get less performance on single core performance, and that may be something to consider. You might not necessarily be hitting higher than what the maximum performance of the CPU is. So if the maximum is in stock is going to be slightly better than the 9900K, chances are the 9900K may actually be better if it's overclockable. Granted, CPU lottery and everything like that. But it's something to consider when people want to sit down and consider buying a PC. You might not need all that power anyways, because you might not want to buy an RTX 2080 Ti. You may just want to buy something cheaper like an RTX 2060, which is pretty much price to performance, and it may just be overall a better buy. And there are other GPUs you may want to consider, a 1070 or a 1660 Ti, or even the 1660. Although at this point, I think the 1660 Ti is the lowest you should go, unless you're wanting to go with AMD. And that's another thing you should maybe want to consider is wait until Navi comes out. But honestly, as long as you have 8 cores and 16 threads at this point, I think you're pretty much fine. Even in 6 cores and 12 threads, you're pretty much future proof for what future proof can mean. And what I mean by future proof is something that you can use in case you can't buy a computer in the future. I see a lot of people misunderstand future proofing as something that it's gonna last you for a long time with equal performance. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is you're gonna basically have a low tier computer. The thing with future proofing is to buy something now because the future may be uncertain and you don't know if you can buy something later on in the future, even if you sell what you have now. So, given that, keeping that in mind, what you may want to consider is buying, for instance, a Ryzen 7 1700 on an AM4 platform, probably by the X470 or even possibly a B450. Because the thing with the AM4 platform is that you can upgrade later on, and that's going to be supported until 2020, which means you're going to be able to, in the future, buy a Zen 2 Plus CPU and put it in that computer, and then you will have a modern computer that lasts you years and years. And I think that's the best route. The best route is to consider maybe buying an RTX 2060 around that range. Don't spend too much, and buy something like a Ryzen 7 1700 if you can, especially now. If you can find a really good deal, there's just no point in waiting, I don't think, because since you have the option to upgrade later on in the future, that's kind of a minor thing to consider. Waiting may be detrimental to you because prices may just go up and then you lose your chance. Granted, it might not happen, and then Zen 2 comes out and it's cheaper or the same price as what you see now, and you would have probably been better off buying it. But it's something to consider. I don't think there's a wrong choice with going with a 1700 and thinking you can upgrade it later in the future unless something happens and you can. But even so, if you can't do it, you'll still have a really great CPU. It's not a terrible CPU by any stretch of the means. Like, I don't know how people can think that just because it's 2 years old at this point that it's going to be really bad. It's a really good CPU. It's just not the greatest for gaming. It's not going, and by that I mean it's not going to give you like high-end performance, but it's going to give you mid-tier performance, which is very good performance, especially for the price. And then on top of that, it's still better than anything you can get on a console. Like, honestly, that is perhaps the best option. And then just save yourself some money. And then later on, the neat thing with the AM4, since you can upgrade it, you can basically upgrade your whole CPU for like maybe even $400. Let's say in 4 years time, you can buy basically 2080 Ti performance for like $200. Probably it's not going to happen, but it may. It's going to be fantastic because then you just spend less money to get probably better performance than you can get nowadays, which is at ridiculous prices, and then you can upgrade your whole computer for like $400 later on, like in a few years, and you probably spent like less than $1,000, and then add $400 in the future, and then you got yourself a really good modern computer that you can use again for another several years. And I think that is the best option for most people. Because, like, honestly, I have a 9900K. I did get a 2080 Ti. I got it basically because of my employer. I got it for cheap. So I went ahead and splurged on it a little bit. I didn't spend top dollars for it because if had I done that, I would have regretted it. But what I have is pretty awesome. But honestly, it's not that much difference from, say, a Ryzen 7 1700, which I also have. I mean, I built one recently, but I gave it to a friend. I've used it. The difference isn't really night and day. There is a difference, but it's something that you can only appreciate if you have more money to throw at it. And then if you have no buyer's remorse later on. Had I paid full price for this, I would probably have buyer's remorse because I would have preferred buying more games than buying just the system itself. And saving that money allows me to buy more games. but it also lets me save up for the future. So in the future, I could, if I wanted to buy or upgrade some of the pieces in there, mostly the GPU, I could do that. For me right now, I'm dealing with issues with the 2080 Ti, which I kind of wish I wouldn't have bought because I'm overseas, and then buying it, and if it has issues, you have to return it, kind of problems. But yeah, anyways, I don't recommend necessarily buying high end because you can run into issues that you may not want. But overall, I think you're just gonna regret it for the most part because like computer technology is currently we're in a stage where everything just changes. I don't think the 20 series GPUs is the best NVIDIA was offering. I think they're just offering a stopgap before they upgrade to something even better. So I think if you buy it for $1,000 right now, I think you're going to regret it in like 2 years time because I think the new GPUs that are going to come out to replace these are just going to be monster GPUs, kind of like how Pascal came out and it was like a monster GPU compared to the 900 series, and then if that occurs again, you're just gonna have tons of buyer's remorse. I honestly recommend people stick with AMD at the moment because especially if you care about price, because there's nothing bad. Like I've heard issues with AMD, can't play emulators and stuff like that. That's not really something that you should care about because it actually can do all this. It can do basically everything that an Intel CPU can. And the little issues that it can't do, the little things that supposedly can do, the Intel CPUs can't really do very well anyways. So you're not really missing out on anything. You're basically missing out on slight better performance on something that barely even works. But yeah, unless you have a very, very good reason on buying an Intel, like, and I don't mean like it's a bad idea to go out high end, because if you're really a big enthusiast and you want the best in gaming, you have to basically go Intel. But that's if you know what you're getting yourself into. But for the most people, people that originally just would have bought a 1060, or they were just interested in entry level equipment or even mid range equipment, and they just are casual gamers and they really just want to play games and they want to play those games well, I still highly recommend just go with Ryzen. Go with the cheapest that you can find right now with the plan to upgrade. The benefit right now is that we can choose between a Ryzen 7 1700 and you can even go Ryzen 5 2600 in that range, and then those are really great CPUs and they should last you a few years until you need to upgrade, and you can upgrade for cheap later on as time goes on. And right now is a good time to do that, and I still recommend Ryzen 7 1700 simply because it has 2 more cores, even though it's slightly slower than a Ryzen 5 2600X. But just the fact that it's only slightly slower is good. But if you still plan to upgrade, either choice is good. But I still just recommend going with the cheapest option because it's just cheaper. Save yourself some money. Buy the cheapest thing. The performance difference between them is not that great, so you may actually end up hurting your performance with other things you buy. Like maybe you buy a cheaper RAM or something, and it ends up affecting you kind of equally compared to buying a cheaper CPU. So buy that, and probably don't buy anything higher than our RTX 2070. I actually don't recommend the 2070 over the 2060, since the 2060 is pretty much the same kind of level of performance. I mean, if you don't have your FPS counter on the side, you probably won't even notice a difference. The only difference will come down the line several years. It's not necessarily because of the VRAM, because there's ways of mitigating that, but the problem will mostly occur just simply because the GPU is slower. And eventually you're gonna max out on it and you're gonna have to replace it. But like right now I'm using a GTX 760. It plays most games well. It's not going to, play the latest and greatest games at fantastic or even playable FPS, but it still performs. And that's only in my system as a stopgap before I upgrade to something else. I may go out and get an RTX 2080 Ti. But honestly, since after I tried it, I'm kind of like, it's great, but it's not necessary. I'm actually waiting for Navi. And once that drops, I may go ahead and buy that unless it's some massive disappointment. But honestly, I don't see a need to go out and buy something right now since I'm not really gaming. I'm actually have to work for a period, and I'm just mostly doing video editing and stuff. So this kind of works for now. But later on, I will probably buy something better and hope for the best. But for most people, again, I don't recommend basically spending an arm and a leg just to get the latest and greatest. It's not for everyone. And that's the point of these videos, is try to get the best performance for the cheapest prices. And I recommend highly Ryzen 7 at the moment. And I recommend the cheapest one that you can find, or even Ryzen 5, again, 2600X, or the Ryzen 7 1700. Buy them now before, again, prices go up, because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Prices may go out way high again, and you may be out of luck. Hope this helps some people. If you're deciding, if you don't know if to buy a computer right now, at least you have the benefit of being able to upgrade if you buy AMD. Whereas if you buy Intel, you may be stuck with whatever you buy. So buy the best if you're buying Intel that you can buy. With Ryzen 7, buy the cheapest at the moment, or with Ryzen overall, buy the cheapest that you can, that you know is going to perform at a decent level, and then just upgrade it later on. And that's it for this video. I'm signing out. Bye bye, guys.